So welcome. Parshat Chayei Sara, which means the life of Sara, actually begins by telling us that Sara passed away. And in fact, this teaches us an important lesson that it's not what a person, the material things that a person acquires in this world, but it's really about the legacies, what a person leaves behind. And that's why it goes to tell us the story of Rivka and Yitzhak. The legacy continues. So the tzaddik, the righteous person, lives on through the children. This is really what happens in the Parsha of Chayei Sara. It's also interestingly enough the longest continuous narrative, the longest story in Sefer Bereshit, in the book of Bereshit, and that is the story of Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, going on the mission to find a wife for Yitzchak. In case you were thinking of going and counting the exact psukim, the exact number of verses, I can save you the effort. There's 67 verses that are given over to this account, which again, if you put that into perspective, it's far more than the story of creation. It's far more than the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, and so many more stories. And obviously, the question is why? Why are so many verses given over to this narrative, the story of Eliezer finding a wife for Yitzchak? And the the Midrash tells us that Yafa sichatan shel avdei avot mitoroton shel banim, that the stories, the conversation of the servants of the patriarchs is more precious before Hashem than even the Torah of their children. Now we need to understand that. What is so special about their servant's story? What is so central about Eliezer's story? And the answer is that in the story of Eliezer, and it's repeated a couple of times, and I'll go into that, within the story lies the Torah's model for emunah, for faith, model for midot, for characteristics, and for hashgacha pratit, for divine providence. And we read all of that in this parasha, in the story of Eliezer. And through Eliezer's eyes, we learn what it means to act responsibly while trusting completely in Hashem, while having the emunah. So if we really think about it, we put ourselves into Eliezer's shoes or his sandals. The mission is quite daunting, right? How is he supposed to know who Hashem has chosen to be the wife of Yitzchak? How's he going to ensure success? And the Torah really captures this. Eliezer says to Avram, Ulai lo toveh ha'isha lelechet acharai. Perhaps the woman won't want to follow and come back with me to my master's home. And the Midrash, interesting enough, tells us that the word ulai, which means maybe, perhaps she's not going to come back, can also be voweled differently to spell a lie, which means to me. What is that about? Eliezer was hinting that he had a daughter, Eliezer had a daughter, and he was hoping that Avram would see his daughter as a suitable shidduch for Yitzchak. But we actually find that Abraham rejects Eliezer. He says, in pretty stark and black and white terms, that my son is blessed, you are cursed. Obviously, because he was from the lineage of Canaan, which for the times of Noah was cursed. And here we find that even the most loyal subject, the most loyal servant, Eliezer, and even though there's great personal attachment between them, that being Avram and Eliezer, still Avram sees the vision of the woman that needs to be married to Yitzchak, and unfortunately Eliezer's daughter can't come into, let's call it, the covenantal lineage. But what we find, how Eliezer responds, is a true testimony to his greatness. Again, he was hoping that his daughter would marry the great son of his great master, Abraham, that should marry Yitzhak, and he's denied this. But yet we find that he continues without resentment. He's absolutely still fully devoted to his master's mission. Again, we can maybe think about that as we, the servants of Hashem, often we might feel disappointed. We might feel that we're not getting the things that ought to be given to us. And it's just about realizing that we need to remain true to the course. We need to remain as Eved Hashem, as the servants to Hashem. Um, we actually see what the true nature of chesed is, and that we find with Eliezer, that he acts purely for the sake of another, that being Abraham. There's no ego, there's no agenda. Yes, he put on the table that he wanted his daughter to marry Eliezer, but now that that's no longer on the table, he gets on with it. And the fact that Eliezer is so humble, it makes him into the perfect instrument for or of divine providence. Okay, as you know, the story unwinds, or as the story goes on, that Eliezer finds himself at the well as he arrives at Aram Naharaim, and he turns to Hashem now. He turns to Hashem in prayer and he says, Hashem, God of my master Abraham, please cause it to happen before me today and show kindness to my master Abraham. Now, it's interesting to note there have been other prayers in the Torah up until this point. There's been the personal prayers for children, for Abraham and Sarah. But here we have the first recorded tefillah for success, just success in daily affairs. Not asking for health, not for children, not salvation, but just for guidance in being able to fulfill one's duties. And again, we just see how humble Eliezer is. He's not really doing it for himself. He's doing it for the prayers come because he wants to fulfill this mission, not for him, but that he should come back with the wife for his master's child, Yitzchak. And really, he's not asking for miracles. If you really unpack it, Eliezer is really just asking for clarity. Hashem, guide me, show me who the right girl is going to be. And he actually says, as you all know, he says, let the maiden to whom I say, please give me some water to drink. And if she replies, drink, and I'll also give to all your camels to drink, then that should be the sign that she is the one that you've designated for Yitzchak. Now, it's very important. Some of the commentators say, should Eliezer have been doing this? Is this form of superstition, of divining, of all sorts of sorcery? And the Ramban Nachmanides says, no, it's absolutely not. It's, in fact, he calls it emunah tmimah, perfect, sincere faith. That is what he is really seeking. He's seeking a sign of virtue in this person. The test focuses, as you know, on chesed, that the answer that she gives will reveal her essence. Is it going to show that she's kind, that she has initiative, that she's sensitive to the needs of others? And obviously, all those characteristics are needed for her to be able to fit and belong into Avram's household. And from the time that Rivka comes out to the well, it's almost as though this was like a musical playing out. All of a sudden, the music, the tempo would increase. V'hinei Rivka yotzeit. Behold, Rivka comes out. By the way, that whenever Torah uses the word hinei, it signals divine timing. And what we find here, and the verses says it as well, that even before Eliezer he's completed his prayer to Hashem, the answer stands right before him. Already Rivka is coming out. And again, just about that tempo, read all the verbs that she hurried, she lowered her jug, she gave to him to drink, she hurried and emptied the jug, she ran back and forth to the well to draw and give to the animals to drink. And so we have all these verbs in the Hebrew. Vatamaher, she hurried. Vataratz, another word, she ran. Vatishav, she drew. So it just reveals, if you like, a soul that's absolutely energized and aflame with kindness. Rav Shimshon of Fol Hirsch points out that Rivka acts without hesitation, without calculation, with no self-interest. It's just she's got this chesed, which is instinctive, which is innate, which is spontaneous, joyous, complete, absolutely complete. It's also interesting to note that the Midrash Rabbah, says that each of her actions, in fact, mirrored Abraham's actions in last week's Parsha, right? Where he sees the three strangers, Just as Avram ran to meet his guest, so Rivka runs back and forth to the well. So just as Avram gave to the strangers to eat and drink, so too Rivka made sure that Eliezer and all the camels had enough to drink, more than they needed as well. So her actions mirrored that of Abraham. And again, that just shows um, Eliezer that she really is the right person, that she has all the traits of Eliezer's master, of Abraham. Again, we see the role of Hashgacha Pratit, of divine providence. I said, Vayehihu terem kilal raber, even before Eliezer had finished speaking to Abraham, asking that this test should be the correct test, and the already arrives on the scene. Very interesting. It says then that Vayaratz ha'eved likrata. By the way, it's always using the word Eved, right? It doesn't use the word Eliezer in all this narrative. Because again, Eliezer always saw himself as the servant doing a task for someone else. He wasn't, in his own eyes, important in this whole mission. He was there, the shliach, just to make sure that he's able to find a wife for Yitzchak. But he runs to greet her. Rashi says that water spontaneous came up and rose for her. She didn't actually have to draw water, but as she approached the well, water already rose up. Now, interesting, you might think, well, that's already an answer to Eliezer's test, right? He sees a miracle being performed. But no, it still says that he ran. He didn't just sit on his laurels, he ran towards her. And what it shows us, importantly, is that faith doesn't replace effort. In fact, you still need effort to go with faith. Um, we're not supposed to be passive. We're supposed to be in partnership. Faith is being a partner with Hashem. We have to act. We have to do our own part as well. And that's why Vayarat Eved. That's why Eliezer runs towards her. And straight away, Eliezer, the servant, he bows. He says thank you straight away to after Rivka gives all the water to drink. And he says, blessed is Hashem, God of my master Abraham, who has not withheld his kindness and truth from my master. And again, his gratitude also shows the importance of gratitude, because what he does with the gratitude is he transforms this success. And again, now it seems to be successful. And by the way, he asks and he finds out if she is from the correct family. And when that's confirmed, that's when he says this blessing. But it transforms just mere success into something holy, into sanctity. And Eliezer recognizes that what he's witnessed is divine providence. And that divine providence rewards faith and rewards humility. Now, what happens is, as you know, Eliezer later now recounts the whole story of what happened to Rivka's family. And again, we have almost verbatim the same verses that went before. And again, we have that concept of Yafa Sichatan Shel Avdei Avot, that the conversations of the servants of the patriarchs are even more beloved to Hashem than the laws given to their descendants. So why is this conversation so beloved? Because again, Eliezer's words embody what it means to have emunah, what it means to live by derech eretz, by respect, faith, ethics, speech, integrity. So again, he recounts everything. He doesn't embellish like so many of us if we were retelling the story, right? So we first have the Torah's point of view on the story, and then we have Eliezer. We see it through Eliezer's eyes, and they pretty much match up one for the other. He doesn't embellish. He doesn't take credit for himself. In fact, gives all the credit to Hashem. He acknowledges the Hashgacha Pratit. He acknowledges the divine providence, every act of kindness that Hashem did for him. I'll just add in a few things. My main focus on the Shiur was Eliezer and the whole concept of divine providence. Rivka straight away, if you again know the story, I'll just go through it with you again, that the family of Rivka say, Hashem Yatzad Davar. Okay, this thing obviously comes from God. We can't dispute it. Who are we to say? We can't speak either good or bad. And they say, even though they say that, they still say, ah, but maybe the young girl should stay with us for a while. Then they say, okay, let's ask what she says. And what does Rivka say? Straight away, she says the famous word, Eilech, I will go. And it's literally that one Hebrew word that seals her destiny. Again, if we just go back a few parshiyot to Abraham, Abraham was Lech Lecha. Hashem says to Abraham in that parasha, Lech Lecha, go. And straight away he goes. There's no calculation, there's no thinking, there's no reservation. Here we have Rivka saying, but it's that same faith, it's the same spontaneity, it's the same thing saying that I'm not going to wait, I'm not going to delay anything. I have complete faith in Hashem, and just like Abraham did here, Rivka is doing the same. That it's meant to be. Hashem Yatzah Davar. This has really come from Hashem. Now Eliezer returns. Okay, so now he's got Rivka. He's got the permission from the family. Now he's returning home with Rivka back to Avram and Yitzchak. And the Torah actually describes the first encounter with Yitzchak and Rivka. Vayisa inav, vayar, he lifts up his eyes and he sees, this is referring to Yitzhak, v'nei gemalim ba'im, and he sees camels approaching, vayetze Yitzhak lasuach basadeh. Sorry, just before that, vayetze Yitzhak lasuach basadeh, Yitzhak goes out to literally mean to converse in the field. What he's actually doing over here is davening. The Midrash teaches us that Yitzchak was praying mincha, and here we have the installation of the prayer of mincha. We already had Abraham, who has the prayer of Shachrit ascribed to him. Later on, we're going to have Yaakov with the prayer of Marit, but here we have Yitzchak. And the moment that Rivka arrives corresponds to this first mincha tefillah in history. And it's just like the prayer of transition, mincha, between day and night. Here we have the transition between faith and fulfillment. Faith of Abraham in Hashem, faith of Eliezer in Hashem, faith, I'm sure, of Yitzhak in Hashem. And now we have the ultimate fulfillment with Rivka coming to meet with Yitzhak very shortly thereafter, obviously their marriage. And again, we can say that the encounter between prayer and providence, again, we have the combination, maybe we have the fusing between heaven and earth. Yitzhak prays, and tachlis, what's happening on the ground is that Rivka arrives. So now we have, thank God, Eliezer, the faithful servant of Abraham. He's completed his task. Rivka joins Yitzhak, they get married. By the way, I pointed this out in Shul the other night, where it says, Yikach lo isha, that Yitzhak takes her as a wife, and he loves her. Takes her for a wife and he loves her. And surely the order is should be reversed. He loves her and therefore he marries her. But the idea being that through a relationship, and the longer the relationship goes, the more one gives to another, the more that relationship develops and the more love comes out of a relationship. So it's about being there for each other, helping one another out. That's where love comes from. It's not that they love at first sight or lust at first sight. Through the marriage, and as the marriage goes on and everyone's doing his or her part, that's where that's where the love really comes from. Again, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch sees the joining up, the meeting of two complementary souls, that being Yitzchak and Rivka. Yitzchak is the man of gvura, of inner strength, of discipline, restraint. Again, I mentioned this in Shul the other day. Abraham, if you like, is the pioneer. He's the one who goes out and brings people into the fold of monotheism. Yaakov just expands this whole idea. And Yitzhak just, after the Akedah, he's living in Israel. He just goes about his work. He undigs the wells that were sealed by the Plishtim, the wells that were dug by Abraham. But it's the idea of continuity, having the discipline to continue what your father, what those people before you started. Okay, so you've got Yitzhak with Gvura, with discipline, and you've got Rivka with Chesed, that active compassion, really, and again that mirrors Abraham as well, and that's where you've got, if you like, balance within the covenant that was started with Abraham, and you've got faith being expressed both inwardly and outwardly. Again, we have now Eliezer retelling the story to Yitzhak. He says, servant told Yitzhak all of the things that he'd done. And again, the whole story is retold. And again, why is it retold? Because Eliezer wants to show Hashem's hand. He wants to show the chain of providence. Hashem's hand involved in absolutely every single detail. That Eliezer, having first begun with prayer at that well, and now ends with his testimony. Um, and if you like, he's retelling the story, he now completes the whole circle of Emunah. And Eliezer not taking credit for it, but simply saying that he was an instrument of divine providence. That's how it all comes together. And again, that would be the reason for retelling the story again. Um, Eliezer is known as Damascus Eliezer, and why it's actually mentioned in the Gemara in Yuma that he was doile umashke mitorat rabbi la'acherin, that he was the one who drew from the Torah of his master and was able to give forth to others. Interesting enough, it's that same metaphor, if you like, of a well, right? Well, you draw water. Here he was doiler. He was drawing from the water from the Torah of his master and giving it to others. And through this mission, Eliezer, in fact, elevates himself from a servant to a master. And again, that all comes down or all comes from his faithful service. He attains a spiritual greatness through his humility, through his seeing Hashem's hand in everything. Just on this whole idea of divine providence, Rambam, Maimonides of divine providence, he speaks about it. And he says that obviously divine providence worked through human beings, right? Hashem needs instruments through which he can play out all that needs to play out. And Eliezer becomes the instrument, becomes Hashem's instrument. Why and how does it so happen? Because again, Eliezer's choices, they align so perfectly, so precisely with divine, with Hashem's intent, that one can even say that his actions themselves become providence. And again, a person could be so fully devoted to the divine purpose, to the mission of Hashem, that that person's deeds become supernatural outcomes. So when a person nullifies his own will before Hashem's, and again, all the Avot did that, but Eliezer does it as well, then his will becomes God's will. There's almost no discrepancy. There's no separation between the will of the person and the will of Hashem. They become one. And that's what Eliezer embodies in this mission. And yeah, we learn about the whole concept of divine providence. Again, the whole concept of why we have to know the precise details, the jug that was on his shoulder, and she goes down and she draws and she gives. We have to know the camels and how many camels. So Reb Soloveitchik, he says that faith isn't built on the miraculous, right? He says that it's built on the everyday things. It's built on the form. It's built on being punctual, being meticulous. That Judaism sanctifies precision, every word, every step, because again, holiness is in every moment. Holiness is in the order, in the attentiveness, in exactly that, in the precision and being aware of everything in every moment and every object that can serve you. And again, what Eliezer is able to do is he finds the wonder. So again, it's not just the waters come up, rise to Rivka, but Eliezer finds a wonder in the repetition. He finds the meaning, purpose in even the smallest details. What Eliezer is really teaching us is that miracles are not interruptions of nature, but recognizing Hashem in nature, seeing Hashem's choreography in the daily events, in the daily heartbeat, the daily rhythm of life. That's what Eliezer is teaching us. Um, just want to add in a couple of things. Um, Okay, we know the whole concept of Rivka going lifnim mushurat hadin, going above and beyond. The instruction or the request was, please give me water to drink. She goes above and beyond. She gives to the camels to drink as well. Obviously, that chesed, which knows no bounds, obviously that was going to be the person who was going to be fit for Yitzhak and could come into the house of Abraham and obviously could take over from where Sarah had left off. Um, but if you look at her acts of kindness, they're actually statements. One could maybe say, one could say that Rivka's bucket, her jug, is a siddur, and every pool of water is like a tefillah or a verse of faith. And again, that's how she acts out. Um, what you also find, I just want to make a point of this, is that Eliezer's mission, if you like, this whole mission of Eliezer is maybe the first act of Masorah, of transmission, right? So Abraham entrusts his servant not only with this particular task, of course, this task was so important to Abraham. He makes him take an oath and he puts his hand by the place of his brit, place of his circumcision, because that was the only holy object that existed at the time. I didn't have a Sefer Torah to make an oath over. So obviously the task was very important, but more than the task, um, it was actually the worldview. He was passing it over to Eliezer. Eliezer, as I said, was Doile Mashka. He was already teaching others. He wasn't just giving him a mission to fulfill, a task, but it was a worldview, his mission to give over this Torah. And what he does, he empowers Eliezer. And that's what every educator should do. Every person who's trying to teach others should be able to empower them, that they are able to continue the legacy, to empower continuity through confidence. Um, Again, what we can take, maybe this will be how I'll end this year, what maybe we can take away. And we can maybe say that we stand at wells, we stand at crossroads of our lives. By the way, the well was always like at the center of the city. And maybe you could say that's crossroads, or, there'd be a sign here to the well, sign there, I don't know, to something else. But again, before everything we do, we have to be mindful and take into account Torah's methods, and they remain timeless. So, what are they? We need to pause to pray. We need to acknowledge divine partnership, right? That Hashem is running the world, but I can't sit on my bum, excuse the expression. I need to do what I need to do. It's a partnership. We need to be able to define the moral criteria, not what do I want, but we can say what is right at every time. We need to act promptly. I think that's such an important idea over here. We see it with Abraham, Vayaratz Abraham. Abraham runs to prepare the meat. Rivka runs, Eliezer runs. We have this, it doesn't say they go. Torah is very specific. Vayaratz, they ran. There's speed involved. You have to act promptly. When there's something to be done, you need to do it. Faith runs. Faith doesn't drift. Faith doesn't meander. I think importantly as well, when we look back, when we recount the story, we have to be able to see providence. We have to be able to see Hashem's, in retrospect, in hindsight, we have to be able to say thank you and give credit to Hashem. Should look here if there's anything else I wanted to speak about. No, just again, Eliezer being the model of humility, of integrity, of being aligned to his mission. Never does he confuse success with advancing his own life story. He's not taking credit for himself. His comes from the fact that he's completed the mission. Um, Give me a second. Very interesting as well. I thought of this. To the best of my knowledge, we don't really have the story of Eliezer afterwards. Like what becomes of Eliezer after this whole story, right? Chayei is so prominent and rightly so. We don't hear much, we don't hear about Eliezer afterwards. But perhaps um, the silence is the reward. What does it mean? That he disappears into the mission accomplished. In other words, his ego, there's no ego, it's dissolved into the faith. Um, we do, however, see there is a midrash, don't remember which exact midrash offhand, which suggests that Eliezer was freed, so he was no longer the servant of Abraham, and he actually became a ruler amongst Abraham's students. Um, but so maybe what we can take out of that is we can say that if a person, one who serves Hashem through loyalty to his values and stays steadfast to Hashem's values, attains spiritual freedom. Um, okay, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to get. I hope you got something out of it, and thank you for joining. Have a good night, everyone. Have a good night.